Good morning, everyone. I'm I-Team Chief Mike Magnoli. Well, it's time for Justice on the Ballot, an interview segment to help voters get to know candidates in the races that will decide who our next leaders will be and shape law and order here in Palm Beach County. Sam Stern is with me on the sofa. He's running to be Palm Beach County's next state attorney. He's a Republican. Sam, we had you on the show in August. That was before the primary. So the field is a little less crowded now. It's you, Democrat Alexcia Cox, and independent Adam Farkas. I want to talk strategy with you. What's your plan for sort of appealing to the Alexcia Cox voter and bringing her into the Sam Stern camp? And same thing with Adam Farkas.
Well, first off, thank you for having me again, Mike. The strategy here is very simple. I'm deeply concerned about the state attorney's office, and it clearly needs significant reform. And there are a number of examples of that. I intend to win this election, to reform this office, and to have the kind of office that people of this community deserve.
Sam, when Adam Farkas was with us on the show, he made some claims about your background as a law professor, and he has a section of his website, The Truth About Sam Stern. There are also some things in there about your experience as a U.S. attorney. Would you like to respond to the things in that section of his website and the things that he said while he was on the sofa with us?
Well, I can only respond to what he said on the sofa. I saw that, and I submitted the documentation to you all demonstrating that Mr. Farkas's claims are completely false. I do, in fact...
How about you being a law professor?
Well, that's correct. I teach at the University of Miami Law School. I'm on their website. I've taught there for a number of years. Students have gotten credits and gotten diplomas. I teach at the University of Virginia's National Trial Advocacy College, where the University of Virginia law students also participate, get credits, and get diplomas. Look, this is the kind of thing that happens during a political campaign when people who don't want change from happening are trying to stop it. Change is coming on November 5th. I'm going to win this election. I'm going to reform this office.
Separate and apart from your experience as a law professor, could you talk to us about a case, maybe the last case you worked on, where you prosecuted a criminal and put him or her away?
Well, I left the prosecutor's office I left public service in 2014. I could give you a number of examples. Let's see. One example when I was in the federal government was I prosecuted one of the most prolific bank robbers in the history of New Jersey. He had committed one of the largest bank robberies ever, hauling $500,000 out of a bank. While he was being prosecuted, he escaped from jail one time.
Whoa.
And he tried to escape again and was killed while trying to escape. So I've handled very significant cases both at the state and federal level. I'm a serious prosecutor. I know how to do the work. I know how to teach the work. And I'm excited to bring those experiences to reforming this office.
We're going to talk about Michael Weissman. He is the local man who made social media threats against former President Trump. And he was able to do pretrial intervention. You and I have talked about this. You think that that was the wrong way to go for him. Why?
Yeah, and to be very clear, it wasn't just the wrong way to go. It was an outrage. This man, after the first assassination attempt, threatened to kill President Trump, threatened to kill J.D. Vance, and threatened to rape their daughters. 2 days after the second assassination attempt, the Palm Beach State Attorney's Office gave him a pretrial intervention, allowing him to have no criminal record, to be able to purchase a firearm in 12 months.
Yeah.
Not only that, Mike, even that makes no sense. Any rational person would know. Mm-hmm. But even worse than that, it was an illegal plea. Mm-hmm. They had no legal right to give a diversion for a second-degree felony where they threatened to kill someone. Mm-hmm. It is an outrage.
Even the fact, Sam, that he had no prior criminal history that I know of, no violence, and clearly mental health issues, those factors certainly were taken into consideration here for the state attorney's office. But you say, Mike, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that there's no criminal history. It doesn't matter that there's mental illness.
The statute is clear. They had no legal right to give him that plea. And even if they did have a legal right, which they did not, it was an outrageous plea. You can simply look across the country at what happens when people are accused of threatening to kill public officials or private citizens. Serious prosecutors' offices take these cases seriously. Mm-hmm. This office took a dive, and it's an outrage. They did an illegal plea for the result that makes no sense. The man could have, at minimum, be put on probation, and he should have been monitored for more than 12 months. He should have a long period of monitoring. He should have no ability to purchase a firearm. And Ms. Cox's position, which I read in the Sun Sentinel, agreeing with this resolution, is outrageous.
We'll ask her about that when we have her. Let's turn the page here. Let's talk about Ryan Ruth. He's the suspect that was outside of the perimeter of the golf course. I heard State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg talking about, because of the nature of the circumstances, it might be hard to get state charges to stick. That's because he didn't shoot at anybody. He actually cooperated with law enforcement. I'd like to pick your brain about that. Do you think that there could be state charges here? And if they were filed, sort of anticipating that this went to a jury trial, do you think that you could convict him on any state charges?
Yeah, I saw State Attorney Ehrenberg's comments, which were before the letter was released by the federal government,
right,
to be very clear about the time of this. And he thought that you couldn't make an attempted murder charge because the man didn't pull the trigger.
Right.
That makes zero sense, Mike. The man camped out for 12 hours with a rifle, with a scope, with constructed body armor in a sniper's nest. And the only reason he was seen was because he had the muzzle pointed out through the bushes of where former President Trump was about to play through. The man was not there to kill the gopher a la Caddyshack.
Okay. So you think an attempted murder charge could stick, and do you think that the state should bring that?
The federal government has brought that case at this juncture.
Yeah.
There's a statute, 351, that they've invoked. Once that happens under the statute, the state's actually preempted from doing that. There may be constitutional issues there, but the reality is, I think State Attorney Ehrenberg's comments are illustrative of the serious issues involving this office, where he thought he couldn't bring an attempted murder charge before the federal government did, with a man with a rifle doing the things that I just described. It's ridiculous.
This is my last question. We're nearly out of time, Sam. You're running as a Republican, and of course, Donald Trump is the head of the ticket running for president again. You hear a lot of people saying that the Department of Justice has been weaponized against former President Trump. You're a federal prosecutor. We're a federal prosecutor. What do you make of that? When people say that, what's your reaction to that?
Look, I don't have any commentary for you on national politics. I'm very, very concerned with what's happening in this community. Another example of the serious issues in this office, one of the Epstein prosecutors who intentionally undermined an underage girl in the grand jury still works there today. Mm-hmm. This office needs serious...
Which one?
Her name is Marianne Dugan. And we saw her name in the grand jury transcripts that were released via the legislative process in July.
Ms. Bella was the lead on that case for the state attorney's office, right?
I don't know who the lead was, but they're both in the transcripts. And Ms. Dugan is clear in those transcripts, attacking those underage girls, discrediting them. This office took a dive in the Jeffrey Epstein case, and one of the prosecutors who did it still works there. It's an outrage. When I am state attorney, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to do an internal review, and we're going to be honest with the public with what we find.
Will you terminate her?
I'm not going to get out in front of anything. We're going to do a review, and we're going to find out exactly what happened.
All right, Sam, the producer is telling me that we're out of time for this segment. We covered a lot of ground here. I think we'll talk to you again before Election Day.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. We'll be right back.